First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Today we're going to discuss kind of maintaining a dorm. A friend of mine sent me a message on Facebook that basically he's a new supervisor. One of the areas he's overseeing is a dorm, and there's a lot of things that are happening in that dorm that he's not a big fan of. So what he wants to do is kind of revamp it. But again, it's going to be like a paradigm shift because it's going to be what they were allowed to do. Now he's going to kind of set that tone, and obviously it's going to be something that affects the inmate population as a whole inside that dorm. So it's not going to be something that you may want to just be aggressive with. He may have to slowly introduce something and maintain that level of control. Now, to share this discussion, obviously I'm going to have retired major and current college professor, Luis Soto. Soto, what's up, man?
Hey, how we doing, Gangi? Glad to be on the show again. Always love it. Our conversations, they're great. So I'm really interested in diving into this one.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. I think that obviously me and you could kind of blend that frontline and managerial perspective because I think we know how it is to both give out the order, but also be the one taking the order. And it's going to be interesting. So guys, now, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks to you brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor. When we come back, we're going to discuss how to kind of revamp this dorm, try to give advice to this new sergeant. I stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description.
All right, and we are back. So Soto, dorms, open areas, a lot of inmates. I mean, it could be 60, 80, 100, even more. It takes finesse to, start implementing rules, even if it's just one rule at a time. You're talking about now going in there and changing the whole culture, the whole dynamic of that dorm. So what would be some of the things that you would recommend to make sure that if we do it, it's safe and secured, it's introduced?
Yeah, I remember, and I heard you saying, it's hard to do without the support of administration. But before we get into that topic of administration, because that's kind of the upper level, the last piece, let's talk about the initial. This is a new supervisor going into a new area, right? So being new, I don't know if it's a new supervisor just promoted or a supervisor that's been there for a minute. We don't know the specifics, but what I know is there's the same common issues or concerns. So if a dorm is already out of hand to begin with, right? Obviously, whoever was there running the unit, whatever officer was there running the unit, that's his first issue. It's not really the inmates. It's actually the officer who runs that unit because they've, like you said, they got the culture going. If inmates don't go in for count and stand by their bunks or stand by their beds or they're by their cells, right? If that's already not happening because of the officer allowing it, you as the supervisor coming in, that's your first issue. So do I fix the inmates first or do I fix the staff first? So that's an issue. And I'm not giving you saying, yeah, you should do XYZ first. It's always about the situation. It's always about who do I have to work with? Am I on first shift? Am I on second shift? If there's more movement on my shift than other shifts, is it third shift where now, definitely there should be no movement amongst the inmates. When it's lights out, it's lights out. Is that going on? So we don't know the specifics, but I know for a fact, the first thing you need to tackle on, or the first issues is, one, how bad or how did the unit get away so much that I'm going to need just more than me? Did the unit get so bad because staff isn't doing their job? So that's the first issue.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is I would like to think that sometimes the supervisor may want to watch the situation without the inmates and staff knowing that they're being watched. But the funny thing is, and we have cameras and stuff like that, but the funny thing is sometimes even when you have a supervisor present, let's say I'm new and I'm just going to go ahead and see what's going on in this new area. Sometimes the officers and the inmates, I'm going to say inmates are being complacent, but technically to some extent, is they may have gotten used to this routine of bad habits, not realizing that it's a routine of bad habits. So I like what you said. I would actually go to the staff member first, same thing that you said, and ask a lot of whys. I would make sure, first off, I do want to understand a little bit of what's going on. So I'm not going to be aggressive right off the bat. Because obviously, these could be senior officers, they're set in the ways, but you got to start giving me some good justifications. But one of the things I'm going to do too is maybe even before I approach staff, is get to know the policies and procedures for that specific dorm, just to see what is expected. And then after I get a good understanding, I am going to go back, and if I see anything that breaks away from that policy and procedure, that's my why. I'm not going to go ahead, unless it's emergent, don't get me wrong, quickly jump down the throat, but give me a why of why we have shifted from what should be to what it is now. Does that make any sense?
No, that's absolutely. When you first go into a new area, obviously it's like going into a new game. You need to learn the rules. You need to know what it is or what the rules of engagement are, right? So absolutely, read the policies, read the post. It wouldn't take you that long either. You know what I mean? Most places have post orders, and within a couple of hours, you're done. You read it. You got the gist of it. Corrections 101, right? So I like the idea that you said, let's approach the staff, get the vibe, what's going on. Is there a problem that I need to fix? Is it something that got away, or is it something that's so quickly and fixable? And asking those questions as to why, makes sense. When you were talking to me prior to the video, you said, hey, let's do this topic. It's a new area. Maybe it's getting away. Residents aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing during counts. It's kind of rowdy. You know what? That's corrections 101, right? The first thing we need to do is make sure we're doing a proper count. How do we account for anything? So that would be my first observation of the unit. If your count time is, under control, then I know the rest of the unit, no matter what little intricacies are wrong, can be fixed rather quickly. But if your count time, you got inmates going into different bunks or different beds or different dorms, they're not where they're supposed to be, you're not able to do a proper count, maybe the officer doesn't even go do the count because he knows who's on the unit. Senior officers don't often do that sometimes, fall into that complacency, that trap. I know who's on my unit. I know who's out. I'm the one that let them out. So I really don't have to walk the tier to do my proper count. And now that gives those residents, inmates, the opportunity to switch bunks, to not do what they're supposed to do during counts.
I love what you said too, because when you're 100% correct, like the call of that count really is a reflection of that officer's level of authority. Because at that point, that is zero tolerance. The inmates should know that. The officer should know that. So, if I'm calling a count and I got the inmates still moving all around, I'm looking at the officer at that point. Like, you have not established any level of authority, because you're right. Maybe before that, we're still learning a little bit, but that count is that neutral spot where I know at least at this time, I'm going to see something that I could work with.
But it also gives you as a supervisor the opportunity, the count time is when the units is the most quiet, right? Because we know corrections, the unit's not always a little bit rowdy or whatever the case may be with the inmates being out, but that's your opportunity to, one, observe your staff member and how well they control the unit, and two, count goes on sometimes for a half hour or so. You do your count, you're done with your count. Now you have that one-on-one with your staff member. And that's the opportunity, because if you come on the unit when the inmates are out, you know, they always see a supervisor. It's like, oh, this is the opportunity I have to go talk to that supervisor. And you don't get to talk to the staff. So during count, that's when I like to do my best observations of how the staff control the unit.
Yeah, I want to know something. I did notice before you said resident, Professor Soto.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. The major's retired. It's all right. You know, still.
So, you know that I'm also involved in community corrections right now, and I had to change my mindset. For 25 years, I'm calling them inmates, and now the progression is let's try to help them reintegrate. So I don't want them call them, hey, inmate so-and-so, inmate Johnson, inmate. We're supposed to call them residents. So I have to remember what conversation I'm having.
Yeah, but your 25-year backbone is in being a major. So obviously you're allowed to get that slip, because we know in the back of your mind what's the priority.
Absolutely.
And you know, I want to mention something. So, you know, anytime that you're going to look to address something that affects the whole, so I'm talking about a whole dorm, you have to have a finesse. I remember when they started taking smoking away, and people are like, oh, just go in there and start tearing cigarettes. I was like, guys, that's a way for inmates to unite. You know, a lot of inmates smoke. We have to slowly introduce it. People are like, oh, guys, we're the ones that I have to, you know, get these orders out there. I got to get these officers to do these orders. I want to make it as safe for them as possible. So one of the things is, if I was that supervisor, and you are going to commit to some culture shift, because it is a culture shift, whether, you know, the behavior, again, is permissible or not, I don't know. These inmates may think it is because they've been allowed, you know, to do it for so long. So you're going to implement something that is going to shift the whole dynamic, that's going to add more restriction. So if you go ahead and do that balls to the wall, you're probably going to have a lot more resistance, a lot more concerns, because I think even at this point, you have to also tell the officer why these things have to be done, and then let that go ahead and push its way to the population. But if I go ahead and address the inmates first and staff, I'm not going to have any belief in what I'm trying to do. I have to first educate the officer, like, hey, this is why we got to do it this way, this way, this way. Okay, fine. Do you believe in why we're doing it this way? Yes. Now we're going to push it over to the population. But by the way, if that officer doesn't believe what needs to be done, then that's going to be an officer that's not good for this post right off the bat. But what do you agree? You think it has? How would you introduce this dynamic, this change?
Well, that's exactly, I like how you put that, because you know, you just can't go there and be the I'm going to be the Superman that I'm going to fix this individual, or I'm going to fix this whole entire tier, because you can't do it by yourself. You need the staff. So, you know, whether it's a new staff member or whether it's a senior staff member, you know, both can give you issues. The new staff member, for lack of a better term, being a new boot, not knowing how to control his unit, is an issue. Or a senior officer who kind of has put it in the back of his mind that I just let things run the way they are. I'm just here for 8 hours. That causes another issue, allowing basically the inmates to run the unit. You know what I mean? So how do you tackle those things? I like the way you put it. You have to ask that question, the why, from the staff members. Once you have, you know, well-versed in the policies, the post orders of that unit, now you can ask that conversation, that communication with the staff member. Hey, listen, I need your assistance, right? You have to be smarter than the average bear, especially if you're a supervisor, right? You may know the answer already, but you have to get that answer from your staff, who you're delegating. Most of the time on the unit is spent by them, not you, right? So maybe initially you have to fix the issue by you and your presence being on the unit. That's why I like the count time. Because during the count time, you know, inmates know it's time for you to be at your place on your bunk. That's the most restrictive time in any part of our day, count time. Inmates are going to test you, try you, not just your officer, but you as the supervisor. Hey, Sarge, can I talk to you? LT, can I have a word with you? Excuse me there, sir. It's count time. What do we do during count time? I need you to be there. I promise you, I'll talk to you when we're out, count is clear, you've got your daytime or day room time, whatever it is. I'll promise you I can talk to you then. But right now, it's like you're laying down the law in the most efficient way. You're showing your staff that that's what you want. You're showing your staff that you have their back. Maybe they're afraid to do their job because the previous supervisor was an absent supervisor. We've had that happen where they don't come to the unit unless there's a problem. So the officer's left to his own demise, basically, hey, I feel that I don't have that connection with my supervisor, that backup, that support, so I let the inmates do whatever they want. So initially, you may have to spend a little bit more time on the unit just to give your staff the support they need, and they, you know what it is, man? You know, you have to lead, right? Don't supervise, lead, right? If you lead the way, they're going to follow. They feel supported, you're going to get control of this unit, but I think it starts at that count time.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think that if you have an officer that wants to do the right thing, when you ask them a why, it's constructive. So it's going to get to a point where maybe they can't justify their position. They should be open to seeing, okay, well, you know what? Let me see. You're making a lot of sense, as opposed to being resistant to your why, even though you're elevating it. You're being constructive. And also, one more note, because I want to talk about from the management perspective here, is I like what you said too. I'm not going to have the individual implement these things without support, because I know they're going to have some resistance. So I want to be there to add that extra level of protection and support for that staff, to let them know that, yes, I'm going to give credit because the officer is implementing that order. Well done. They're not pushing it on someone else, because that's another thing. We'll get to that briefly, but I want to show them, here's the thing. If I come in as a supervisor, right, and I'm revamping this whole unit, I don't want the inmates to think that it's really me, only because I want that authority to go to the officer. I'm going to support what they're pushing across, but I really would like it for them to believe it, and then I sit there and support it. It's not because I'm a coward. It's not because I'm coming. It's just that I got to give this guy or her this level of authority back. So if I go in there and I start making changes and this person's kind of resistant, he's going to do something foolish. He's going to say, hey, guys, you know, the only reason why I'm doing this is because Sergeant Gangi is pushing on me. I don't want that. I want you to go in there and take responsibility for what needs to be done.
You hit that on the head, and I agree 100%, because the best feeling for me as an officer on a unit is when the sergeant came on the unit, right? And all the inmates are out and during their rec time or whatever the case may be, and an inmate approaches that sergeant and say, hey, Sarge, can you help me with this? Let me ask you a question. And the first thing that sergeant, a good sergeant that I followed throughout my entire career, did was like, well, wait 1 second. Did you talk to the officer first, right? Did you give that opportunity to that officer to resolve your issue before you brought it up to me? Because now you just broke the chain of command. So there's another small tidbit on how to gain access or how to get control of that unit again. You have to empower that officer. You know, don't come to me with something you should have gone to him with, and now you're just bypassing that authority right there. So I enjoyed that supervisor mentoring me in that fashion, but it made me feel good, like I was supported. That was a simple terminology saying, did you talk to him first? Did you try and give him the opportunity first? I felt empowered. I felt like, yeah, my man, you going to my sergeant over me. You never gave me the opportunity to it might be a dumb question, something simple, but it empowers that individual. And like you said, I like the term that you said also. Sometimes after you attempt to do it the right way with that staff member, maybe that staff member isn't the right staff member for that unit. It's something you have to consider as well. But you give them the opportunity first.
Right, you know, and it is all about, I've done a video on this, and I believe I have a book coming out. It's about perception of authority too, you know. I mean, authority really is perceived. So if I go in there and I, as a supervisor, start regulating the inmates, that's actually very insulting to the officer. I'm having this dialogue with the officer between us so they can go ahead and be confident what they have to do. Now, I will get upset if I find out later on that the officer they may be implementing it, but they're putting the responsibility on me. Now I have a problem because, you know, you're not taking the authority I'm giving you. You know, I've given you this authority to go ahead and implement what needs to be implemented. And instead, now I can start to see why the unit was the way it was. Because you're afraid to have that level of authority. And then when you're working in the dorm, you know, that authority's got to be on point. Now, moving up, when we start talking about management here, is that the reason why I'm telling the sergeant that you definitely want to make sure that your higher level is involved, because as you do a culture shift, because it's going to be a culture shift, you're going to get those inmate complaints. So they're going to be writing those JPAYs, the IRF system, whatever it is, and they're going to be doing it in numbers. So if we're not all on the same page, you know, administration is like, what the hell's going on with this sergeant? What the hell's going on? So you really want to make sure that they're aware of what exactly you're planning on doing, and everybody's on the same page. Because if you don't have that support, you know, you're not going to be able to do anything. Now you agree, when you do a culture shift like that, those inmates are going to be complaining, correct?
Well, they're going to start writing grievances. They're going to start trying to, again, subjugate the authority of the new supervisor coming on the unit, trying to peg you as the problem and not them as the problem. So that's where important communication has to happen once again, right? Whether I talk to my area lieutenant, right, or whoever's above me as far as my superior, you have to get the buy-in, not only from your staff member, your officer, but also from your upper echelon. Could be the lieutenant, could be the chief, could be administration, because in the long run, they're the ones that are going to hear complaints from the inmates, right? But you want to know ahead of time. You want to let them know ahead of time, hey, these are the issues that I see on the unit after I made my observations. Things may not be going, or they're out of control and I need to fix it. So you're going to get these complaints, because anytime someone is doing their job or trying to instill the policies, inmates are going to complain because they were getting away with things for so long. So now, as long as you have administration aware that this is going to happen, they'll know how to answer those grievances. They'll know how it's not the sergeant that's the problem. It's not the supervisor that's the problem. He's just trying to get control of that unit.
And you know what's funny, as we're having this discussion, I'm actually thinking of something too, maybe something that may have to be a concern. So this is a supervisor that just came into this position, right, that notices all these concerns. That means there was another supervisor before that that noticed these concerns and didn't do nothing. So how does that affect the relationship with supervisor to supervisor?
Well, I mean, that's one. We don't know how that supervisor got to that area, right? Whether it was by way of promotion, the other supervisor transferred to another prison. We don't know what the specifics are, but you are absolutely correct. The reason why you're there and you're seeing all these faults in the unit, or the unit being out of control, someone else just basically overlooked it or didn't care enough to say, yeah, we have to get a hold of this. So how does that affect? That's why, again, it's unfortunate, but the good thing about us is that we need to communicate with one another, right? Because when we don't, we open the door for the inmate population to be able to use that against us. You know, they can use that same terminology that we use all the time to divide and conquer. So yeah, you're coming in and you know that they were not doing a well enough job to make sure that this unit gets under control. But again, the easiest way for me as experience, as I'm telling you, is one, like you asked, and like you said before, get the staff member to buy in, you know, explain or ask them to explain to you, hey, why do we do this the way we do it? Why do we need inmates in their beds, in their cells, in their dorms, in their respective area when we're doing count, right? What can happen if that does not happen? And once you get their buy-in, remember the communications with upper echelon saying, hey, I am going to lay down the law on this unit. I am going to get it under control, right? There may be some grievances. There may be some complaints, but I just want you to know where it's coming from.
Right, and all because, you know, prior to the person doing the revamp, all because you're not getting complaints doesn't mean the unit is, you know, running how it's supposed to be run. Technically, you should always get some level of complaints. You know, sometimes I'm not always upset as long as it's not a routine. If, oh, yard was shut down a bit early. Okay, it happens. but at least I know there's a level of authority there. Now, again, we could look into it. Why was it shut early, whatever it is. But if it's not a routine thing, if it's not, stuff happens. Emergency situation, it is what it is. But also, if I was, let's say, the administrator, right, and I found out about this issue, let's say it is running amok. It does travel down. You go to the major, the highest level of custody, who brings it down to that area supervisor, who brings it down to that frontline area supervisor. So technically, there's a lot of people that would be involved if, this unit's been that way for however long. Now, the funny thing is most time administration may not realize there was a problem until it comes from someone trying to revamp it. But the sad thing is, if that person doesn't bring to the higher level that we're doing this revamp, the initial impressions comes from the population. And it's going to kind of paint a picture that this sergeant, is whatever, is over aggressive.
It's troublesome, or he's a problem maker, or whatever the case may be. But it by you being in administration, but you have a different feel to it. You have a different aspect of it because you came from the ranks. So you understand what a unit is supposed to be like. So administration can't fall into that trap where, no complaints, it means the unit is running well. It means there's no issues on that unit. No complaints is going to be like, oh, okay, something has to be going on in there. Inmates are running it because if they're not complaining, that means they have control of the unit. So administration can fall into that trap. And I think you can better explain it than I can by being at that level of administration when you see your colleagues making maybe those small mistakes that you have to kind of insert your expertise into and say, wait, no, that's not what is going on. What's going on is this. And I think you've seen that because the inmates aren't the only ones that are going to complain. If they can't get their way, family members will be calling in, won't they? Complaining about, oh, my kid, even though it may be a 40-year-old on the unit, they're still going to call home and say, hey, call in, talk to administration, tell them that this officer or this supervisor is running amok. So as being part of administration that you have probably had to put and inject your expertise and try to minimize or straighten out some of those things that you hear over the years.
Well, the funny thing is sometimes when these inmates put the complaints in, they actually snitch on themselves. Oh, the sergeant said I can't be doing this. Well, you can't be doing that. So they've just been doing these things for so long that they forget that what you're doing are rule infractions. And now you have a supervisor right now that's going to make sure that you don't violate any of those rules. So, it is a very interesting dialogue, but I think we came down to pretty much that support, introduce it, give that level of authority to the officer to make the change. Don't go there as if you're the parent, cleaning stuff up. No, make sure that officer is the one that implements that change. But again, they have to understand it and they have to believe in it, because the last thing you want is for them to use you as an excuse. Because then for a fact when that happens and I'm not working, that unit's not running the way it needs to be. Because I'll guarantee the officer's like, hey, we got to be on point today because Gangi's working today. No, I want you to have that presence of authority. So when Gangi's not working there, it still maintains where it needs to be, Hey, so do you have anything you want to say in closing?
I just want to say that, it's very important that when you come into new areas, your first priority is to observe, right? Learn the post orders and policies, and then gauge your reaction to what you observe after that. And if you have specific questions of, hey, this is what's happening in this unit, I'm trying to implement this, send us our way. Because if you give us specifics, we can basically hone our commentary to that particular situation that you're in, and maybe we can help you even more. But again, as always, I enjoy being on the show and talking about these topics. Thanks again, Gangi.
Thanks, Soto. It is a good topic. Again, I just want to make sure that when we do it, it's also done in a safe and controlled manner, because again, if all the inmates are used to doing it a certain way, you're not just dealing with one or two inmates. You're dealing with an open dorm who's going to feel the pressure of that change. So, you have to come up with a strategy. You have to get that support from management. So when inmates go to exhaust that next level, because, you're not doing what they want done, then they get that kickback right from management. Nope. And we show that full support. So again, it's timely, but it's definitely something that must happen. So, and again, one of the best advice I think was given today from Soto was observe that count. that really advertises that level of authority, because that for me was that zero tolerance moment. This is my count. This is my fucking job. You know what I mean? And if at any point an inmate's gonna talk to me during my count, knowing that I have to concentrate on this, they should be regulated immediately. But if they're allowed to do that, then you know that's the culture, especially if it's more than one. And right off the bat, I'm gonna go address the officer saying, why are you allowing this to happen during your count? As always, guys, the show is tipped. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe. Hold on. Let me just edit that out. Okay, good.